Venezuela stands at the cusp of significant political and constitutional change. President Nicolás Maduro Moros has proposed a comprehensive reform package aimed at reshaping the nation's governance structure. This reform, announced in December 2024, has ignited intense debate and speculation regarding its potential ramifications for Venezuela's future. The proposed changes, if implemented, would touch upon every branch of government, impact the nation's economic policies, and redefine the relationship between citizens and the state. This essay delves into the intricacies of the proposed constitutional reform, examining its key elements and their potential consequences. We will explore the proposed changes to the justice system, the restructuring of the legislative and executive branches, and the ambitious plan to decentralize power. Furthermore, we will analyze the rationale behind introducing a new gold-backed currency, the Venezolano, and its potential impact on Venezuela's beleaguered economy. Throughout this exploration, we will adhere to a neutral tone, presenting the facts and potential implications of each reform element without bias or speculation. The aim is to provide a clear and concise understanding of this pivotal moment in Venezuela's history. This analysis will be particularly relevant for policymakers, academics, and individuals interested in understanding the evolving political landscape of Latin America. The proposed reforms, if enacted, have the potential to fundamentally alter the power dynamics within Venezuela. They represent a bold attempt by the Maduro administration to address long-standing issues of governance, economic instability, and public participation. However, the path to implementing such sweeping changes is fraught with challenges. The success or failure of these reforms will undoubtedly shape the future of Venezuela for years to come. The proposed constitutional reform includes significant changes to Venezuela's justice system, aiming to address concerns about efficiency, transparency, and public trust. One of the most controversial proposals is the introduction of the death penalty for heinous crimes. This measure, targeting offenses such as intentional homicide, sexual abuse, terrorism, and corruption, represents a significant departure from Venezuela's existing legal framework. Proponents argue that it will serve as a deterrent against serious crimes, while opponents express concerns about potential miscarriages of justice and the irreversibility of capital punishment. In a bid to expedite legal proceedings and enhance access to justice, the reform proposes the widespread adoption of telematic judicial procedures. This shift towards digitalization aims to reduce delays, minimize bureaucratic hurdles, and ensure timely resolutions for legal disputes. The use of technology in judicial processes has the potential to enhance efficiency and transparency, making the justice system more accessible to citizens across the country. However, it also raises concerns about digital literacy, equitable access to technology, and the potential for technical glitches to disrupt legal proceedings. Further democratizing the judicial process, the reform proposes the introduction of citizen juries. This move seeks to involve the public directly in judicial decision-making, particularly in criminal cases. The rationale behind this proposal is to foster greater public trust in the judicial system by allowing citizens to participate in the administration of justice. However, concerns remain about the potential for bias, the ability of ordinary citizens to comprehend complex legal matters, and the logistical challenges of implementing such a system. The proposed reforms to the justice system represent a significant attempt to address long-standing criticisms and enhance its effectiveness. However, the introduction of the death penalty, while potentially popular among some segments of society, raises serious ethical and legal questions. The success of telematic judicial procedures hinges on addressing concerns about digital equity and ensuring the integrity of digital processes. Similarly, the implementation of citizen juries requires careful consideration of potential biases and the need for adequate training and support for jurors. The long-term impact of these reforms will depend on their implementation and the extent to which they address the underlying challenges facing Venezuela's justice system. The proposed constitutional reform outlines a fundamental restructuring of Venezuela's legislative branch, aiming to create a more inclusive and representative system. The unicameral National Assembly, currently in place, would be replaced with a bicameral federal Congress. This new legislative body would consist of two chambers, a chamber of deputies elected through direct popular vote, and a second chamber composed of representatives from each of Venezuela's 25 autonomous federal entities. This shift towards a bicameral system aims to provide greater representation for regional interests and ensure that legislation considers the diverse needs of Venezuela's various states. The inclusion of a chamber representing federal entities is intended to foster a more collaborative and less centralized approach to governance. However, critics argue that this structure could potentially lead to legislative gridlock, slowing down the legislative process and hindering effective governance. Adding another layer to the legislative process, the reform mandates that all laws passed by the bicameral federal Congress be subject to mandatory referendums. This provision aims to give citizens a direct voice in the lawmaking process, enhancing public participation and ensuring that legislation reflects the will of the people. Proponents argue that this measure will strengthen democratic accountability and prevent the passage of unpopular laws. However, critics express concerns about the logistical challenges and potential costs associated with holding frequent referendums. The proposed transformation of the legislative branch represents a significant departure from the current system. While the shift towards a bicameral legislature and the introduction of mandatory referendums aim to enhance representation and public participation, they also raise concerns about potential gridlock and the feasibility of holding frequent nationwide votes. The success of these reforms will depend on the effectiveness of the new legislative structure, the ability to engage citizens in the referendum process, and the willingness of political actors to work within this new framework. Section 4. Restructuring the executive branch. The proposed constitutional reforms envision a significant restructuring of Venezuela's executive branch, aiming to devolve power away from the presidency and towards a more collaborative model. A central element of this restructuring is the replacement of the presidency with a presidential assembly. This new body would comprise representatives from each of Venezuela's 25 autonomous federal entities, shifting the executive power from a single individual to a collective body representing regional interests. This proposed change seeks to address concerns about the concentration of power in the presidency and promote a more inclusive approach to governance. The Presidential Assembly, with its diverse regional representation, aims to ensure that executive decisions consider the needs and priorities of all parts of the country. However, critics argue that this structure could lead to decision-making paralysis, with regional interests potentially hindering national unity and swift action when needed. Furthering the decentralization of executive power, the reform proposes replacing state governors and municipal mayors with state and municipal government councils. These councils, elected through popular vote, would assume the executive responsibilities currently held by governors and mayors. This shift aims to bring governance closer to the people, allowing for greater local control and responsiveness to community needs. However, concerns remain about the capacity of these councils to effectively manage complex issues, and the potential for local political dynamics to hinder efficient governance. The proposed restructuring of the executive branch represents a bold attempt to reimagine governance in Venezuela, shifting from a centralized presidential system to a more decentralized model emphasizing regional representation and local control. While this approach aims to address concerns about the concentration of power and promote greater inclusivity, its success hinges on the effectiveness of the new institutions, the ability to balance regional interests with national priorities, and the capacity of local councils to effectively manage their responsibilities. The long-term impact of these changes will depend on their implementation and the willingness of political actors to adapt to this new power dynamic. Section 5. Decentralization of power. A central theme running through the proposed constitutional reform is the decentralization of power. This overarching objective aims to shift authority away from the central government in Caracas and towards state and municipal levels. The rationale behind this approach is to empower local communities, enhance government responsiveness to citizens' needs, and create a more balanced power structure. The proposed reforms outlined in previous sections, such as the creation of a bicameral federal Congress with regional representation, the establishment of a presidential assembly, and the formation of state and municipal government councils, all contribute to this decentralization agenda. By transferring significant powers and responsibilities to these new entities, the reform seeks to foster a more participatory and bottom-up approach to governance. Proponents of decentralization argue that it will lead to more efficient and effective governance, as decisions will be made closer to the people most affected by them. They also believe that it will enhance democratic accountability by giving citizens a greater voice in local affairs. Additionally, decentralization is seen as a way to address regional disparities by empowering local governments to tailor policies to their specific needs and challenges. However, critics express concerns about the potential for fragmentation and inequality. They argue that decentralization could exacerbate existing regional disparities, with wealthier states potentially benefiting more than poorer ones. Additionally, there are concerns about the capacity of local governments to effectively manage increased responsibilities and the potential for corruption to increase with less centralized oversight. The success of decentralization in Venezuela will depend on a number of factors, including the clarity of the legal framework, the capacity of local governments, and the willingness of the central government to relinquish control. It will also require addressing concerns about potential inequalities and ensuring that adequate mechanisms are in place to ensure accountability and transparency at all levels of government. The decentralization of power, if implemented effectively, has the potential to transform Venezuela's governance landscape, but it also presents significant challenges that need to be carefully navigated.